Now, I want to take you to the Temple of Solomon, because this is what Solomon built to house the Ark of the Covenant, and the Ark sat in that location. The Dome of the Spirits sits right over the stone that sat in the Holy of Holies, and I want to take you there to see this. This is as you look at the base of this, you will see the stone upon which the Dome of the Spirits is sitting. It's not attached to it. And you see the pillars, the columns there, and now I want to take you to a representation of that. You see the Dome of the Spirits? I'm going to take away the dome, and you see the 8 pillars. Take away the pillars, and so you see the foundation stone. Take away the foundation, and there you have a square stone with 4 keyways that would secure it into place. That is what was in Solomon's temple, dead center in Solomon's temple, in the Holy of Holies. And this is its position in relationship to the foundation stones that have been uncovered on the Temple Mount. Now, to understand this, as the scripture says, this is before the foundation of Solomon's temple began. It says Solomon made affinity with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. The word affinity in the Hebrew indicates a secret agreement that has to be kept in the family, so it requires marriage to keep it within the family secrets. That's why Solomon took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had made an end of building his own house and the house of the Lord. Every time it mentions his marriage to Pharaoh's daughter, it speaks of it in relationship to building the temple. It's a very important key, because this affinity that he made with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, is important in that the only machine that was known in that day was the lever. And the Egyptians were masters with building with levers and sand hydraulic technology, and that is why Pharaoh made a deal with Solomon, and Solomon married into the family secrets of the house of Egypt. Now, the tabernacle in the wilderness was 30 cubits by 10 cubits, the Holy of Holies being 10 cubits by 10 cubits. Whereas the temple was 60 cubits by 20 cubits. Solomon made it much larger, 4 times larger than the tabernacle in the wilderness. Why? Is because of what he was building. He was building a machine to hide the Ark of the Covenant. And King Solomon sent and fetched Hiram out of Tyre, a worker in brass, filled with wisdom and understanding, cunning to work all works of brass. Hiram cast 2 pillars of brass, 18 cubits high apiece. A line of 12 cubits did compass them, and he made 2 capitals. Chapiters are capitals of molten brass to sit on top of the pillars. Now, these pillars, if we were to have 5 people in a circle join hands and stretch themselves out, that's how big around these pillars were. They went up 31 feet tall, and on top of that, a capital of brass was made for it. The capitals were 5 cubits tall, the scriptures say. 5 cubits, very important, and the scriptures spend about 4 chapters speaking about these pillars and these capitals in different places in the Bible. Very important. Here are these pillars. The pillars are 30.93 feet tall, a telephone pole and a half tall, 6.5 feet in diameter, and they are 5 inches, about that, or a handbreadth, in thickness. So they're hollow, and they're made of brass, cast by Hiram out of Tyre. The capitals are 8.6 feet tall, made of solid brass, 6.5 feet in diameter, hundreds and hundreds of tons, and they have to sit on top of a hollow column, a telephone pole and a half tall, out in front of the temple. Very important. Solomon set up the pillars, and he set up the right pillar and called the name Yechin, which means in Hebrew base or fulcrum. And he set up the left pillar and called it Boaz, which means force. Solomon is describing the 2 sides of a lever, force and the base or the fulcrum on which it pivots by these 2 columns. And now you're going to understand the rest of the story, because here is where those columns stand out in front of the temple, and they support nothing. There they are in relationship to the rest of the articles of the furniture, and as we see, the Ark of the Covenant is not yet in here as I'm showing it on this particular slide. And then it says, at the time that the temple was dedicated, they brought the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord into his place, and they drew out the staves, that the end of the staves were seen out in the holy place before the oracle, and they were not seen without. And there they are to this very day. What does it mean they were seen without and not seen without? When the ark is put in its place and the staves would be put in and just barely touch the curtain, then if you were to draw the staves out to one end, they would literally push the curtain out, so that if you were in the holy place, then you would be able to see that the staves were pushing the curtain out, so you could see the staves, but you still couldn't see the staves because the curtain was there. So you could see them, but you couldn't see the staves. And what it allowed it to do was the Ark of the Covenant sat completely in front of this stone. The staves were completely pulled out to one end. Why? Because this whole stone is a room, an elevator room that's operated by sand hydraulics and a lever system that Solomon built in the temple. And now you're going to see how this works. Because when the dedication of the temple occurred, the glory of the Lord filled the house, and this spoke Solomon these two sentences after 7 years of building. The Lord said that he would dwell, it says in English, but Hebrew, it's a very unusual word. It's shakan, which means an established place to inhabit, and he would shakan in thick darkness, which is arafel, which means to be obscured from the sight of men. I, Solomon, have surely built thee, Yahweh, a house to dwell in, and there the word dwell is Zebul, which means an exalted residence, and a settled place, Makowan, a fixed place for thee to abide forever. Solomon was giving us a riddle that not only had he built an exalted residence, but he had built another place for the ark to remain forever. And the word forever in Hebrew means an extremely long time, not necessarily for all of eternity, obviously. 500 years later, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came. He and his army pitched against Jerusalem, and he built a siege wall all the way around Jerusalem. And from that siege wall, Nebuzaradan, the captain, launched with these huge siege engines these huge rocks, boulders, and busted down the walls of the city of Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan then, when the breach was made, and when they took it and they defeated the soldiers, Nebuzaradan and his troops went up onto the Temple Mount and walked into the holy place, because they were after the greatest archaeological treasure, the most wonderful treasure in the entire world, the Ark of the Covenant. When they walked into the temple, what did Nebuzaradan find in the holy place? Nothing. There was nothing there. It says that he burnt the house of the Lord, the king's houses, all the houses of Jerusalem, completely ransacked and destroyed the whole city. What was he searching for? He was searching for the Ark of the Covenant, but he couldn't find it. What did he find? It says the shovels, the snuffers, the spoons, the fire pans, the bowls, all the vessels of brass the Chaldeans took away. And the two pillars Solomon made for the house of the Lord, the height of 18 cubits, the brass capital on top of it, the height of the brass capital was 3 cubits. Wait, I thought that capital sitting on top of that pillar, 31 feet high, was 5 cubits. What happened to 41.25 inches of solid brass weighing several tons sitting on top of a 31-foot column? When he got into the temple, all that was there was brass. Where was the table of showbread? Where was the golden lampstand? Where was the golden altar of incense? And where was the golden Ark of the Covenant? It wasn't there. Everything that was taken into Babylon was carefully detailed. And even Belshazzar was having a party and drinking out of the vessels of the temple, wasn't he? But yet, 70 years later, when they came back, everything was brought back. Not one thing was left in Babylon, but what never went and what never came back? The Ark of the Covenant. How did the rest of this brass, though? What happened to 41.25 inches of brass? Watch what happens. You're watching this pillar and this capital as it now sinks into this hollow column. It travels 41.25 inches. And it is operating a lever system underneath the temple to hide the Ark of the Covenant. It starts out 5 cubits, it ends up 3 cubits, to when Nebuzaradan goes in, it ends up 3 cubits. Watch how this operates.